So after returning from Australia, we had been for Rob's birth. There was quite a lot of congratulations and good wishes all around. Rob and Mac was extremely happy. And then the Sultan of Delhi, that's DELI, rang and asked if he could come around at the 40th day after Rob's birth, which in Malay culture is the first time that a baby's feet touch the ground. And there's a little ceremony, and he would like to perform that little ceremony. So that was done. He came with his grown-up daughter, and performed the little ceremony of welcoming Rob into the world and having passed this key afterbirth milestone. And then I think it was probably a couple of months after that the baptism ceremony took place with a very elderly Methodist minister who had lived in Indonesia for a very long time as a missionary. And so Mac asked him if he would perform the baptism, but that Mac would like to make some amendments to the usual traditional ceremony, which Mr. Baker had no problem with. So that took place just with a very few witnesses, including the Vice Consul John Byrne and his wife Lolita. Then the question of opposition to the Indonesian opposition to the formation of Malaysia dominated the next 12 months. There were demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations of the Communist Party youth, the Front Pemuda, but they were every month, on the 17th of every month. But they were actually, as I said, peaceful. And I actually took photographs of this and even went up to the fence which was keeping them out. And, they were friendly greetings from them, and said, yeah, I'd wave. But when it came to August of that year, 1963, they became a bit more hostile, and although the actual day, which was Malaysia Day, was supposed to be the 31st of August, it was put off for another 2 weeks. And I think that was probably to allow the Indonesian government to discuss how they were going to deal with this, because there would be much more hostility in that on that date than had been before, and they especially expected it in Jakarta. In Medan, we woke up pretty early, like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, to get ready for whatever was going to happen. We had arranged for a kind of a stile to be built over the back fence so that the servants could escape if they wanted to into a government property which was next door. But we decided to stay, and at about 8 o'clock in the morning, the youth demonstrators breached the fence, and they were unarmed. So they picked up stones in the fountain that was between the house and the office of the consulate, and they started breaking windows, and they hadn't been allowed to have petrol, but they had sump oil, and they were painting slogans with that, and they had car tires, car tire levers, so a sturdy steel weapon, if you like. And they came into the ground floor of the house. Mac had been in his office, but when he saw them coming, he came up the stairs and along the corridor to our bedroom, and he got out his shotgun. Well, the demonstrators finally came up the stairs, and they just immediately turned left and went into a bedroom. But some of them saw the refrigerator at the top of the stairs, and in the refrigerator were bottles of tonic and soda water. So they picked them up, and they looked up at that point and saw Mac with me behind him, and in my arms Rob, Mac with his shotgun. They were so surprised to see that there was someone still in the house that they dropped the bottles, which exploded on the hard tile floor of the corridor, and then they jumped down the stairs and fled. And when they came, no, it wasn't long after that we heard ding, 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 ding on electricity posts, iron ones that were on the street. That was in fact a signal for them to gather together and march to the local police station and report what they'd done. We didn't know at the time that in fact they had spoken to the police beforehand and had permission to have the demonstration, so long as they didn't use petrol or weapons, dangerous weapons. So they marched off. The police, after, half an hour or so, arrived to see how much damage had been done. Well, the vehicles, including our car, had been tipped over and the windscreens and windows broken, including also a Land Rover that belonged to the consulate, and all the furniture had been tipped out of the house and broken. Some pictures on the walls, including that one of fishing boats in Bali, had been slashed with these tire levers, and that picture was in ribbons. Fortunately, they couldn't get into Mac's office, which was in fact heavily guarded by iron doors. So we had put a few things in there, not knowing what was going to happen, a few precious things in there, so they were safe. When the police came to inspect the damage done, they said, "Oh, we gave them 10 minutes. We didn't expect so much damage in the space of 10 minutes." The Indonesian government will compensate you. Would you please make out a list of things that are broken and lost, including your private property and the British government's property, which we ultimately did. The other outcome of that, one was, of course, that our friends, the Alis, who were the Malaysian consuls in Medan, we went to see them too. They had been very traumatized by this act of people, Indonesians, especially in Sumatra. Many of the Indonesians in Sumatra are Malays, and so related to the Malays of Malaysia. So it was, they had been psychologically unprepared for their house and office to be attacked. And the American consul stepped in at this moment and said to the Alis, "What do you plan to do? You're breaking off diplomatic relations. You'll be going back to Malaysia then." And he took charge of the situation and helped them because they were in such a state of shock. And so they very quickly left. And we stayed, of course. Diplomatic relations between the British and the Indonesians was not broken off. But what happened from the Indonesian government's point of view after those riots, which in Jakarta had been very violent and had included stevedores from the port of Jakarta. In other words, very tough guys, and that it was much more violent in Jakarta, and not only towards the British embassy, but also they already knew where all the British citizens in Jakarta lived, and they went to their houses as well and broke things up. So there was a big panic in Jakarta, but not the same sort of panic at all in Medan. And I, in fact, went to each British family in Medan, which might have been 10 or 12, just to talk things over with them. But what the Indonesian government then decided was that Mac would have to leave, because I don't know if I've described this already or not, but the monthly demonstrations at the consulate led to slogans being painted on the side of the house, and they were Ganyang Malaysia, that is Smash Malaysia, and Go Home Mackay. So there was this element of personalising the situation in Medan, that the Medan officials felt that they should say, plan to leave, but you can choose your time, which I think was, on one hand, obeying Jakarta's orders, but on the other hand, showing a respect for Mac, because he had very good relations with the senior government people, but particularly the military, because they shared a common background. We decided that we would leave about a year later, and we told them this, and they agreed.